On January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, was legally appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. Leading up to 1933, Hitler had become a prominent figure with widespread support, fueled by the bleak atmosphere in Germany resulting from the global economic depression and the lingering national humiliation from the defeat in World War I. As a captivating orator, Hitler skillfully exploited the anger and despair felt by many voters, promising to lift Germany out of the depression, restore German cultural values, reverse the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and rebuild Germany as a world power. Following his appointment as Chancellor, Hitler and the Nazi Party rapidly consolidated their power, transforming Germany into a totalitarian dictatorship fully subject to Hitler's personal will within 2 years. A significant event in this consolidation was the Reichstag fire on February 27, 1933. The Nazis falsely blamed the Communists for the arson, using it as a pretext to convince President von Hindenburg to issue the Reichstag fire decree. This decree significantly curtailed the freedoms and rights of German citizens, allowing the Nazis to eliminate political opponents. On March 23, 1933, the Enabling Act was passed by the Reichstag, granting the government, and effectively Hitler, the power to enact laws without the consent of the Reichstag or the president for a period of 4 years. The Nazis moved swiftly to eliminate all other political parties. The Communist Party was banned in March 1933, followed by the Social Democratic Party in June, making the Nazi Party the sole legal political party in Germany. Following the death of President Hindenburg on August 2, 1934, Hitler merged the offices of Chancellor and President, assuming the title of Führer and establishing himself as the absolute dictator of Germany. The Nazi regime began establishing concentration camps as early as March 1933, shortly after Hitler's appointment as Chancellor. The first camp, Dachau, opened in March 1933, initially serving as a detention center for political opponents, primarily communists, socialists, and German Social Democrats, as well as trade union members. However, as time went on, the scope of people imprisoned in concentration camps expanded to include other groups targeted by Nazi ideology. Jehovah's Witnesses, gay men, Roma, and Jews were arrested and placed in the camps. Although the historical narrative of World War II and the Holocaust is often dominated by the roles of male perpetrators, it is crucial to acknowledge and understand the involvement of women as guards in Nazi concentration camps. It is estimated that approximately 3,500 women served as guards in various camps. The majority of women who became camp guards came from lower to middle-class socioeconomic backgrounds and generally lacked relevant work experience before joining the SS. Once recruited, these women underwent training largely conducted at the Ravensbrück concentration camp, which served as the primary training center for female Nazi guards. They were responsible for a significant portion of the violence routinely inflicted upon female prisoners. The atrocities committed by female guards in Nazi concentration camps took many forms, ranging from brutal physical violence to systematic psychological torture, and deliberately created inhumane conditions. Physical violence was commonplace, with guards frequently beating prisoners with various implements such as thick sticks, whips, and even boots. And one of the women who became part of this cruel system was Ruth Closius-Neudeck. Ruth Closius was born on July 5, 1920, in Breslau, Germany. Details about her family background are scarce in the provided material. She aspired to be a nurse but worked as a saleswoman in a textile warehouse. She later married and became known as Ruth Neudeck, or Ruth Closius-Neudeck. Neudeck's initial aspiration to become a nurse, a compassionate profession, stands in stark contrast to her later role as a perpetrator of brutality within the Nazi concentration camp system. This discrepancy raises questions about the factors that led to such a radical transformation in her life. The limited information about her family and early influences makes it difficult to fully understand the roots of her actions. However, in the 1940s, as the Nazi regime increasingly expanded its influence throughout Germany, many young people were consumed by Nazi propaganda. Like most young people at the time, Ruth Neudeck was also influenced by Nazi propaganda. In July 1944, Ruth Neudeck arrived at the Ravensbrück concentration camp to begin training as a camp guard. The need for female guards in concentration camps became increasingly urgent, especially after Joseph Goebbels declared total war in 1943, raising the age limit for women's involvement and mandating work in war production. For women seeking employment or higher wages, the job offered free housing, prepared meals, and no specific qualification requirements, making it an attractive option for some. While at the camp, Neudeck quickly impressed her superiors at Ravensbrück with her unwavering brutality towards the female prisoners, which led to her promotion to Blockführerin by the end of July 1944. In Ravensbrück, Ruth Neudeck rapidly established a reputation as one of the most ruthless female guards. Former French prisoner Geneviève de Gaulle-Antonios testified after the war that she had witnessed Neudeck slit a prisoner's throat with the sharp edge of her spade. Other prisoner testimonies recounted how Neudeck would strip several prisoners naked, douse them with cold water, and make them stand in the cold air for hours. In December 1944, Ruth Neudeck was promoted to Oberaufseherin and transferred to the Ukermark extermination complex, a sub-camp located near Ravensbrück. The Ukermark camp was initially a detention camp for girls, but was converted into an emergency extermination camp in January 1945. Ukermark served as a site for the systematic killing of women deemed sick, no longer efficient, and over 52 years old, from Ravensbrück. In the short period between January and April 1945, approximately 5,000 women were murdered at Ukermark. As an Oberaufseherin at Ukermark, Neudeck was directly involved in the selection process, determining which women and children would be sent to their deaths, and in the operation of the gas chambers used for their extermination. In March 1945, as the war neared its end, Ruth Neudeck was appointed head of the Barth subcamp. Even in the chaotic final months of the war, Neudeck continued to hold a position of authority within the Nazi camp system. Her appointment as head of a subcamp indicates a continued level of trust and competence in her role as an enforcer of the Nazi regime's brutal policies. However, following the end of World War II in Europe in May 1945, Ruth Neudeck was arrested by Allied authorities. She became a defendant in the Ravensbrück trials held by the British Military Tribunal in Hamburg, along with other female SS personnel. Neudeck faced numerous charges related to the cruel treatment and murder of prisoners during her service at Ravensbrück and Ukermark. Ruth Neudeck was ultimately found guilty of war crimes by the British Military Tribunal, and she was sentenced to death by hanging. On July 29, 1948, she was executed by British executioner Albert Pierrepoint on the gallows at Hamelin Prison.